Edo, the largest city in the world. Tokyo, the most populated city in the world. Edo means mouth of the river. Tokyo means capital of the East. '19th century. 21st century. Edo. Tokyo. Edo, which was the capital during the time of the shoguns, is the ancient name for Tokyo. To the east of Asia, the archipelago of Japan stretches out in an arc for over 3,000 kilometers. On the island of Honshu in the Pacific Ocean, the city of Tokyo is built around a vast central park. The imperial palace is located on the former site of Edo Castle, which was built at the end of the 16th century. Even though it still fascinates the Japanese, the imperial palace has only a symbolic role. The emperor may no longer take part in politics, but he symbolizes national unity. There are over 30 million inhabitants in Greater Tokyo, 12 million of whom live in the center of the city. Tokyo resembles Los Angeles in the arrangement of its housing. New York has inspired the height of its new buildings. And Paris, the creation of certain monuments. In Tokyo, your bearings are lost among the lights of the city. Communication routes crisscross in the megalopolis. While a railway line goes right around the city, superimposed motorway slip roads and interchanges cover the city. All means of transport are used for getting around the city, which doesn't have a real center. In fact, Tokyo consists of several juxtaposed city centers across about 10 districts, which are very different one from another. Despite the demand for property, the city has numerous parks. Land is so expensive that new surfaces are created by encroaching upon the ocean. An enormous conurbation unites Tokyo and its neighboring cities. It brings together a quarter of the 127 million Japanese. Only the shores of Tokyo Bay have contained the city expansion toward the east. Economic growth has boosted construction and architecture. Edo and Tokyo live together, and new creations widen perspectives that are more and more daring. For the Japanese, the material world is ephemeral, a concept that architects express in their own way. Nothing is fixed, everything can change. Movement is therefore conveyed in the designs. The architecture becomes more and more fluid. The Japanese have an acute sense of communal life. For example, where they live. Policemen are everywhere to humanize the area and to provide information, as the majority of streets have no name and the door numbering, which is not continuous, is very confusing. In the West, crowds are often synonymous with every man for himself. The Japanese, on the other hand, are very considerate of others. The mask is a protection against pollen, but it's also worn to avoid spreading germs. Tokyo is a clean city. Everywhere it's scrubbed, scoured, and polished. In a city such as this, hygiene demands constant attention. The Japanese have their own code. For example, they avoid physical contact when greeting each other. A piece of advice: do not smoke while walking. For nicotine addicts, there is a solution: smoking stations. This way, non-smokers are happy and there's no reason to throw cigarette butts on the ground. In the street, traditional clothing alternates with outfits that are original or classic. The education system is based on the British model. Another influence, this time American, baseball, one of the most popular sports in Japan. Japanese values stem for the most part from the two main religions. Shintoism, the oldest of the two, reveres millions of gods. Buddhism arrived in the 6th century AD. Daily life is pervaded by a love of nature and the serenity that arises from it. The blooming of the cherry trees is a national event, and they evoke the evanescent nature of life and of beauty. Another springtime event, graduation ceremonies. Families make huge sacrifices in order to give their children the best education. Even after university, the Japanese remain somewhat childlike, likable little characters whose functions are promotional and utilitarian pop up everywhere. Motorbikes are everywhere as well, but parking them just any old place is out of the question. There are special parking spaces available and fitted with neat automatic padlocking systems. There may be a lack of space, but certainly not a lack of ingenuity. To provide more space, pump hoses hang from the ceiling at gas stations. Huge nets allow for a spot of golf right in the middle of the city, a luxury that not everyone can afford, even if Japan does enjoy a high standard of living. The Japanese economy is the second largest in the world, after the United States, double that of Britain. And yet, there are no natural resources, no oil, no gas, and only a bit of coal. Wind power, on the other hand, is developing. Leisure activities are an industry in themselves. The Japanese love their amusement parks, and the structures blend well into the scenery of indispensable infrastructure. Several methods of transport are vital for avoiding traffic congestion. The underground system, managed by the city and a private company, has been simplified in order to improve efficiency. The class of station managers is also much appreciated. High-speed trains appeared in the 1960s. They connect Tokyo to the main cities in the country. The bus is less efficient in terms of speed, but it is still extremely useful in the city. Just like the taxi. On planet Tokyo, the taxis are ever present and they also have their own distinctive characteristics. Yes, the door is controlled by the driver. The decoration is often very personal, and white gloves are part of the outfit. Railway lines crisscross the whole of Tokyo. The Tokyo station is a replica of Amsterdam's railway station. It survived the bombings during the war, and its Western characteristics are an inspiration to artists. Here, the Shinkansen provides an escape from the pull of planet Tokyo. "5 a.m. Tuna fish wait patiently in Tsukiji Fish Market. Japan is the world's largest tuna fish consumer. Now the auction is about to start. But the quality of the fish must be checked beforehand. In fact, in Japan, fish is often eaten raw. Once allocated, the lots are dispatched without delay to the restaurants. The best pieces will be savored raw, while the others will finish up in a can. Next to the fish market, a huge space is dedicated to other seafood. It's estimated that each year a Japanese person consumes, on average, more than their weight in seafood. At Tsukiji, fish is cut up to order. The pieces, for the most part, serve as raw material for one of the enduring industries in Tokyo, sushi bars. Sushi, raw fish on a ball of rice, comes in an infinite variety. Sushi, always partnered with soya sauce, is eaten in one mouthful. Noodles are the specialty of other establishments. They're Japan's version of fast food. Flavor and freshness are by no means compromised. And the advantage is that the noodles can be eaten straight away. Faster still, the bento, a ready-made meal that can be bought from vending machines and special bento shops. Its content varies according to region and season. The drinks machines are, in fact, automatic bars. The choice is so great. Tea and coffee are served hot or cold. Japanese cuisine demands a lot of patience and time. A meal is always made up of several dishes. Vegetarian cooking, which excludes meat and fish, originates from the Buddhist monks. Here, the combination of seafood and vegetables is used beautifully through a cooking process that is always swift. The quick cooking heightens the natural flavor of the ingredients. Yumiko Kano chooses the ingredients for their nutritious and decorative qualities. I gather ingredients according to the season, and then I choose what inspires me. In bringing beauty to the dish, I want the client to feel welcome. I want to convey a sense of hospitality, and for the clients to feel relaxed and healthy because of what I prepare. The food may be fried, but it's not greasy. During the cooking process, both the flavor and the color of the ingredients are respected. Cooking here is synonymous with personality and creativity. I was lucky to have been brought up in the beautiful landscapes of Japan. Here, through my cooking, I try to pass on to others my sensitivity, my perception of what is beautiful. So in a way, you're an artist. Cars have limited access in the old districts of Tokyo. Sometimes it's just not possible for them to get through. Peace and quiet favor artistry. Mrs. Shoko Ota has a specialty, shodo, the art of calligraphy. Shodo originated in China, just as the system of writing did. Brush painting developed later on, but with the same materials, a brush, ink, and paper. And the paper must be conditioned before it can receive the ink. Japanese paper can be cut much easier after it has been dampened. The paper absorbs the water, which allows the strokes to diffuse. Shodo is a skill that cannot be improvised. My father was a painter, and he's the one who taught me how to paint. I'm passing on this art to my daughter, and my daughter has also become an artist. Diluted with water, the ink is a mixture of carbon black or soot and glue. The brush handle is often made of bamboo. The ink can be colored to reproduce the subtleties of nature. The tip of the brush, made of wool or badger hairs, and the skill of the artist create delicate brush strokes. Ink painting is a delicate exercise. In fact, corrections are impossible. The painting is achieved in one pass. On the hanshi, the paper used for painting, there is no room for error. The technique can be applied to other media, like traditional dress, the silk kimono. On porcelain, the same plant patterns are found which express the fundamental role played by nature in Japanese culture. One of the variants of the Japanese garden originates from the Shinto shrines, where it defines a sacred space. It also corresponds to the image Buddhists have of heaven, harmony and balance. The succession of the seasons is a factor of balance for the Japanese. In spring, nets are used to protect the iris plantations from voracious birds. Every step is taken to avoid external forces from disturbing their blooming. In Yoyogi Park, one of the city's lungs, the vegetation is carefully looked after. The fragile branches are supported, and for the winter, the trees are carefully wrapped up. On Sundays, unusual sounds bring the park to life. This is the meeting point for amateur rock groups. Yes, for a long time now, Japan has been open to Western influences, and in particular from the United States. Fashion, of course, But music also is shared with Europeans and Americans. And sometimes Planet Edo crosses paths with Planet California. With their pompadour hairstyle, their leather, and their 50s jeans, the rockabilly fans perform every week in Yoyogi Park in the hope of being spotted by a television producer. Rockabilly emerged in the United States in the mid-50s. It's the purest of the rock and roll genre. In the 1980s, it saw a renewal of its popularity. Though the Japanese are fascinated by dances from elsewhere, they have by no means lost interest in their more traditional shows. No theater is one of the traditional forms of Japanese theater. It emerged in the 14th century from Shintoist rituals. Today, however, there are no religious references in the texts. No costumes are heavy and imposing. They indicate the character's social status. The mask allows an actor to play different roles during the same performance. Katurio Shimodayara is an actor. In the repertoire of No Theater, there are approximately 200 different plays. Actors have numerous parts to choose from. They can be humans, ghosts, spirits of nature, gods, or even ogres. On stage, we perform in a world of dreams and surrealist illusions. Time unravels differently compared with real life. What is slow in the real world is even slower or faster. We exaggerate. Anyway, it is a fantasy world. Once the mask is in place, the real world disappears. Shinjuku is a lively district to the west of the city where government offices, businesses, and shopping centers come together. Nighttime here is synonymous with life. Since the Edo era in the 17th century, Shinjuku has been a hotspot for nightlife. The area was, in fact, the first stop on the road which led to the ancient capital, Kyoto. Shinjuku has lost nothing of its unbounded vitality and its bustling day and night action. Sometimes, after shopping, couples head toward a very Japanese entertainment venue. Karaoke. Kara means empty, oke means orchestra. Karaoke means without the presence of an orchestra. Here, the karaoke rooms are designed in such a way as to help its enthusiasts forget all about the outside world. They flick through the catalog and carefully choose their songs. The video illustrates the music. All that's left to do is sing the words. The more out of tune the singing, the funnier it is. In small groups, it's easier to lose your inhibition. Thanks to karaoke, one feels weightless on planet Ito. Some forms of entertainment in Japan are more traditional. The geisha is an institution which dates back to the 17th century. Preparation of the young woman begins with the makeup. The top half of the body and the face are painted white. Long ago, noble ladies distinguished themselves from working-class women by the paleness of their complexions. Fair skin was a sign of distinction. The geisha hairstyle is so complex that it's now more and more common for them to wear wigs. The kimono is the most important element. The young woman must bear the long preparations with good grace. The art of dressing is taught in the okiya, the house where geishas traditionally live. Last step, the kimono is completed by the obi, a long sash that is tied in the back. As kimonos are all the same length, the obi allows the kimono to be adjusted at the waist. The kimono is personal. Once she is ready, the geisha is in a position to fulfill her role, for example, providing entertainment during a business dinner. But what is the exact role of a geisha?
The main is, of course, the dancing, singing, of course, but we talk with the customer and make them relax.
A geisha must feel totally at ease in all situations. She must be able to liven up a conversation. To enhance the end of a meal. And she displays her skills in the traditional arts. Kendo originates from the saber fencing that samurais took part in. Wearing a sword was prohibited in the 19th century. It was replaced with the shinai, a sword made of split bamboo. Kiku Azakura is a kendo teacher. Kendo begins and ends with the same principle, the respect of others. This is fundamental. To score, a good strike must be delivered to the top of the head, the wrist, or the breastplate, using the upper third of the shinai only. A shout is made on the completion of each strike. Opponents are seen as fighting partners, not as enemies. Video games may be less exhausting, but they certainly burn a hole in your pocket. In Japan, the video games market is the second largest in the world after the United States. A huge part of the industry's profits come from products derived from the games, especially in toys. In the district of Akihabara, a big specialist store is a temple of fun. New products fly off the shelves. It's fascinating. Passion for old toys, however, is just as extreme. The most beautiful pieces are priced in the same range as works of art. However, prices sometimes reach such heights that they are enough to deter even the most determined collectors. Serial mangas take up a whole shelf. Manga is the term used for comic books in Japan. They're produced on cheap paper for mass consumption. Yet for Shinya Yamamoto, mangas are irreplaceable. I've been reading mangas since I was a child. I've grown up with them. Now I'm a student, and mangas are still a part of my life. It's believed that approximately half the Japanese read at least one manga a week, and sometimes the readers make a petition in order to keep the story going. Yes, I really believe that mangas influence people. We learn quite a lot through them. We feel emotion, we discover new ideas, new ways of thinking. I really believe that every reader lets himself be influenced. We learn loads of things through mangas. And there are all different types. It's almost impossible to class mangas into categories. There are so many different types. There really are a lot. Still in the Akihabara district, the Japanese live another passion: electronics. The shop assistants try to draw in shoppers by every possible means. A paper handkerchief is often used, but these publicity flyers have now been replaced by screens. Since the appearance of transistor radios in the 1950s, the Japanese have become the market leaders in household appliances. DVDs, TVs, cameras, digital photography, laptops, and mobile telephony. Competition is getting more and more fierce, especially with other Asian countries. Opportunities are so diverse that when one loses profitability, another profitable sector can easily be developed. Between recreational type electronics and materials for the general public, the streets of Akihabara are never empty. The telephone has become a fashion accessory. They're changed regularly. More than in the West, social dress code is really important and indicates adherence to a certain group. Whatever these appearances may be, electronic gadgets are an integral part. On planet Edo, appearance is everything. You are what you wear. In other districts, fashion is also taken into account, but the criteria are more conventional. The district of Omotesando Street is regarded as the Saint-Germain-des-Prés of Paris or the King's Road of London. The latest fashion trends draw in the crowds. There is a huge fashion market in Japan. For several years now, a number of Japanese designers have gained international reputations. Their creations are on the increase and are in the same league as their French and Italian rivals. With regard to creativity, anything is possible. It's just a question of paying the price. And as buying power here is one of the highest in the world, creativity is unlimited. Why not experience nighttime in the daytime? Thanks to a trompe-l'œil sky. A shopping center has made this choice in order to free its clients from the real world and bring them into its own orbit. It may be business, but there is still a keen sense of propriety, and customers are greeted by hostesses during the opening of department stores. Here, the sense of service implies extreme courtesy. And good manners don't stop you from admiring the cakes. As with most things in Japan, decorations borrow their motifs from an almost childlike universe. Image is not improvised. The distinctive socks and college girl skirts follow very precise norms, but wearing a uniform does not mean that new trends are ignored. Depending on their budget, they choose eccentric or classic. And prices also change according to district. Next to the temples of consumption, a Buddhist monk counts on the generosity of passers-by to help fill his rice bowl. He is isolated in his own world, and no one is surprised. This collection is part of his daily tasks. Ginza, a district often nicknamed the Champs-Élysées of Tokyo. Here, it's difficult to resist temptation. Ginza literally means the place where silver is minted. Yet, there were swamps here when Edo became the capital. The area was cleaned up and the traders came, and with them came prosperity. The Shibuya district is a hub of communication. One meeting point, the statue of the dog Hachiko. For 10 years after his master died, he came every night and waited for him outside the station, a sense of loyalty that the inhabitants of the district wanted to commemorate. In Japan, the conception of work has evolved through its young people. More and more, women are working, people are changing jobs more regularly, and a great flexibility allows students as well as the older generation to find a job. After the economic boom of the 1980s, intense property fever took a hold of Tokyo. The worst could have been expected, to lose all architectural coherence. However, in building upward, the city has kept a strong personality. In Japan, all the buildings must comply with rigorous earthquake resistance measures. The country is, of course, earthquake prone, and it's impossible to predict earthquakes. The best protection consists of adopting materials and structures that are capable of resisting them. These modern techniques have allowed Shinjuku, for example, to build skyscrapers. There are still some sheltered spots where the inhabitants continue to find inner peace. Through the majestic torii, the portico entrance, visitors can reach the sanctuary dedicated to the Emperor Meiji, who reigned for 44 years from 1868. Written on a plaque of wood, the visitor makes a wish, which is then hung under a canopy. Another paradox. In a pragmatic society where nothing is left to chance, they believe in the possibility of changing the course of destiny by making a wish. Religion is perceived in a very practical manner. The Japanese see religion as a way of forming a relationship with the gods, to whom they ask for their wishes to come true. Their wish to get married, perhaps. The Shintoist priest presides over a traditional wedding ceremony. Marriage is still a very important institution in Japan, but the population is getting older. The birth rate is one of the lowest in the world, while the level of life expectancy is one of the highest. A fountain welcomes the faithful to the Sensoji temple. They purify themselves with the water before the Sanchasai festival begins. Suddenly, a giant dragon appears, held up by local men. The dragon chases a lotus bud. For Buddhists, the lotus flower represents the release of a pure spirit from an impure body. A group of geishas take part with great ceremony in the festival which honors the Buddhist saint Kannon, who is worshipped in order to obtain her mercy. Kannon is one of the most widely worshipped divinities in Japan and mainland Asia, where she takes on different appearances and names. This deity is often represented riding a dragon. In the Far East, the dragon is a symbol of energy and prosperity. Touching the dragon's head is supposed to bring good luck. On the margins of the festival, the people waft the incense toward themselves in order to gain or to stay in good health. For a few yen, they can pull a stick out of a metallic box, and every stick corresponds to a small drawer with a message inside. Their fortune appears within the ideograms. Work, love, money, success, they long to find out. When the news is good, they keep the message. On the other hand, if the future looks bleak, they tie a knot with the fateful message to ward off the ill fortune and think about it no more. Beneath the urban motorways, the pulse of planet Edo beats. The wadaiko, the traditional Japanese drum, was already beating in the 6th century. It punctuated religious ceremonies and encouraged soldiers during combat. Today, there is renewed interest in the wadaiko. A number of groups have formed, and their rhythms have gone beyond the country's borders. monorail leads to Odaiba, a district that grew out of nothing at the end of the 1980s. But since then, the attractions have multiplied. France once loaned the replica of the Statue of Liberty in Paris. The Japanese kept a copy. So a bit of Paris, a bit of New York. Tokyo is a patchwork planet. The building housing a TV channel was created by one of the great Japanese masters of contemporary architecture, Kenzo Tonge. The clean lines emphasize even more the difference between the planets. Contact with the Earth is quickly lost, and the higher one goes, the larger the visual field becomes. Spaceship passengers, for a brief time, the inhabitants of Tokyo rediscover their city. But after a stay in orbit, it's time to return to Earth. Edo, Tokyo. Their path appears to have been drawn for centuries. Suddenly, unexpectedly, the city questions itself. Its vision is blurred. Tokyo confuses the senses. One thinks they've found the path, but find oneself somewhere else with no bearings. Yes, it's easy to lose your way in Tokyo, as the city is a permanent crisscross of colors and influences, of techniques and boldness, of concepts, styles, and rhythms. Day and night, without respite, the city looks elsewhere for new shapes, new ideas. It shakes them up, steadies them, only to adapt them to its own culture. Another planet, but a planet where there is lots of communication. Tokyo is a kaleidoscope. It goes in every direction, between austere traditions to crazy dreams. Tokyo is a puzzle, a huge puzzle where every district forms a piece. Distance is needed to take in the whole city. Only then, when you're far enough away, does the present move away, and through the city lights a planet future appears, which may, in fact, be very similar to Planet Edo.